Thank you, Shailajaji, for that entirely undeserved introduction. What I do want to say at the very beginning is that most of what I wanted to say has been covered by Darshan and Ritudi. This is what happens if you have to speak in the presence of your gurus. They know it anyway, and they have said what they have taught you. So now I have to make up as I go along, and you will bear with me. What I have thought, and I thought very hard as to what I can bring to this discussion, is my understanding of this issue as a political scientist. The very same issues that both Darshan and Ritudi have flagged, had so beautifully illustrated, and which I think many of us are here familiar with, but need reiteration. And I think some of the policy points that Ritudi put forth are so important at this juncture to be understood in this way. What I would like to bring is the understanding of the political scientist, or more, I think appropriately, a more political understanding to this issue. And I say this with some confidence because I see around the table a large number of people who have, in some way or the other, been engaged with the politics of many aligned issues. And I hope that what I have to say strikes a resonance in their political consciousness, of keeping this issue at the heart of this of the discussion. The two points, and I won't speak at great length because I mean to just provoke some kind of thought processes. There will be two issues to which I will refer. One is the distinction between AYUSH and LHT. It's a kind of binary that we all work with, and which both of them have referred to. And this distinction between the two is something that I would like to talk about. That's one. And the second thing that I would like to talk about is the whole process by which, one very significant process by which Ayurveda has made its presence felt in contemporary post-colonial India, which is as an industry. And what this process of it becoming an industry has done to the knowledge system, and how we need to respond to this. Now, many of us are already aware of what it has done to transform the knowledge system. But so now, what our response should be, and where we can begin thinking, because I'm also conscious and very happy that this discussion is taking place in the context of a larger dialogue on ecological democracy. I don't see it as incidental that SADET is organizing this, but central to the idea of how we can think about this. So to think of the politics of knowledge around Ayurveda and LHT in the context of ecological democracy, that's the second point I would like to talk about. The first, the division between the kind of binary between AYUSH and LHT. In the scholarly literature, and the intellectual literature, and historical literature particularly, what is coming out more and more is that this division, which many of us take for granted, which is the division between a classical tradition and the folk tradition. Actually, this is not entirely a division of the ground. I should say that this is not entirely a division that has always existed in our context. The sharp distinction between the classical and the folk is not a characteristic of definitely the Indian civilization and many other civilizations as well, but what I understand is certainly. And prior to the colonial period, the way in which knowledge existed was very different from the way in which knowledge began to be constructed in the colonial period, and that is something that we have inherited. So, in the post-colonial, and we now carry those categories of classical and folk, and the distinction between textual knowledge and non-textual knowledge, oral tradition, and so on. And these distinctions are not helpful if we are to go to the essence of the discussion today, which is if we are going to talk about a healthier India, this distinction is not useful. Now the fact is that it exists, and all policy documents, and as has been very correctly posited, that the policy frame, the policy framers, those who execute policy are barely able to deal with AYUSH. We all know the contestations which have made at least AYUSH somewhat respectable. LHT is really hard for them to understand. And what I am saying is that some of us, when we are influencing policy and when we are trying to persuade policy, of course we have to work with these distinctions. And we have to continuously assert the significance of the LHT. And on that, since so much has been said, one doesn't need to reiterate. But I think that what is more important for us, and around this table, are not just policymakers, but a lot of us who are concerned with issues of democracy on the ground. And this is a very fundamental issue. If there is if the distinction that exists at the policy realm is undemocratic, as Ritudi said, I really like the way she said that we have a pluralism, but an undemocratic pluralism. Let us not be unaware of the fact that this is a reflection of the undemocratic pluralism that exists on the ground, to which many of us subscribe. There is a great, by now what we've done in the last 150, 200 years is we've built up vested interests around keeping these distinctions alive, and the fact that the Vaidya is superior to that of the local practitioner. So whether you have the Gunis in Rajasthan, or Hamjo Bujo, whatever you call them, every arena has their own sort of healers and their practitioners who are deeply respected in the community. But there are these divisions, and as a political scientist, for me to see power structures and to see them at work on the ground and how undemocratic they are is equally important. And for me to point out that here there are a large number of people who've been associated with people's movements, social movements of all kinds. And when we see undemocratic behavior on the ground, that's something that we need to confront ourselves with. And I think that much of it is a reflection of, the undemocratic nature that we see at the policy level is a reflection of the undemocratic pluralism many of us subscribe to. And the fact that these are undemocratic tendencies between knowledge systems that we really need to contest on the ground. And if we are able to do this on the ground systematically, then I think we have, I'm not saying that it's a linear process, that first we have to be democratic on the ground, then we can be democratic at the policy level. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that it's really important to assert that as well. And I think that we have enough evidence, we have enough reason, we have enough knowledge to, assert that these systems coexist, they have learned from each other, they have borrowed from each other, and continue to do so. And that the best of the Vaidyas and the best of the local practitioners both acknowledge the learning that they do from each other. And this is a knowledge frame which breaks hierarchies. And if we are to contest hierarchies of any kind, anywhere, then it has to be contested on the ground first, and by us. So this is one thing that I would like everyone here to recognize, that that power exists at different levels, and many of us who believe in an ecological democracy may not always be sort of very conscious about it when we are talking about how we operate on the ground. And I've been in very, very interesting debates, even with those who are trying to legitimize local health traditions, in which there have been debates about which of the local health traditions can be legitimate or not. So are only practitioners that work with herbs and can demonstrate, you're talking about how do you provide evidence of medicine. But I have been in debates within local health traditions where people are saying that if you work with जड़ी बूटी से काम करते हैं, तो आप दिखा सकते हैं कि ये जड़ी बूटी लेने से आपकी ये तकलीफ जो है वो खत्म हो जाएगी. लेकिन आप अगर भूत प्रेत की बात करेंगे तो हम आपसे नहीं बात करेंगे. Now this is a very interesting debate. I don't dismiss it. I think it's a very valuable debate. But I think that these debates exist, and here we are the ones creating hierarchies. And we need to be conscious of them and to see how we are going to mediate about them. The second issue that I said that I would like to talk about is, you know, how we deal with this transformed Ayurveda that is now hegemonic in the whole discourse of contemporary Ayurveda. And one of the things that I have studied somewhat closely is the pharmaceutical industry, which is now producing these Ayurvedic medicines in India. Now it's more than 100 years that they've been in operation, and now we have all seen that they are producing medicines, yes, in the classical form, but ever since the Drug and Cosmetics Act allowed, they are producing what are known as the proprietary medicines, patent and proprietary medicines, and they are bringing in a large number of transformations, literally, in the way in which Ayurvedic medicines are becoming accessible to people. So whether it's single drug formulations to, producing Ayurvedic medicines in the form of tablets and capsules and syrups, etc., they have actually transformed Ayurveda and presented it. And the reasons for this, we've talked about earlier, and I'm sure many of us are familiar with. That's not what we need to get into. The point is that it is precisely this transformation which seems to ascribe a modernized version, a modernized appearance to Ayurveda, that actually make it inaccessible to the large number of people that Darshan Bhai was talking about. That when you create medicines in this particular form, and you put them through the entire manufacturing process, as you said, that manufacturing process itself makes it into a commodification that Nitudi kept referring to. This commodification process is what makes it alienated from people, and that's what makes it so very expensive. Now the point is that this again is the creation of a huge sector in the market, which has its value. I'm not here to now say, apart from the fact that it's here to stay, and if all of us in this room put together decided to do away with it, we couldn't. So that's of course the ground reality. But apart from that, it has its place, and it's here to stay. But the point is that this is a sector that does not address itself to a majority of the people, and yet what it does is to present a model of what modern Ayurveda, or indeed modern Unani or Siddha or any of these systems should look like. Swarik Bhat, you see the Tibetan medicine coming from Ensikang in Dhamsala. All of them feel that everyone begins to see themselves as modernized only when they come in those kinds of forms, these new forms that have been set up by industry. Now, this, I think, is something that we need to think about very seriously. When we are talking about providing access to healthcare, in which access to medicines is a very important aspect, then one of the things that we need to challenge is this model of modernization of these systems, where we can believe that it is possible to manufacture at a smaller scale, it is possible to manufacture at a local scale, with keeping the local requirements in mind, without fancy packaging, but with an affordable form of access to a limited market, as a modern model in which these systems become accessible. Now this is actually a completely out-of-the-box idea, which many of us who believe that commodification is problematic will find hard to subscribe to. We would find it very difficult to think that we can actually have a very different model of making of medicines. I won't call it manufacture, because manufacture has very, very typical connotations, which I think we need to contest. But we can have different models of making of these medicines, which make them affordable and thereby accessible. And this is where I think that the fact that we have had so much deeply political thinking about health and access in this country is where it needs to come in. We've had, it's true, public health initiatives, community health initiatives are not largely focused on AYUSH and LHDs. That's true. But then there have been many, many community health initiatives which have actually begun to take these knowledge traditions very seriously and incorporated them into their work, and that has transformed their intervention, their health intervention. I think that when we need to talk about and spread the ideas of such community health movements in order to build confidence in such kind of initiatives across the country. The other thing is, I mean, all of us, I think a large number of us here are connected to more than one kind of social movement or the other on the ground. And we know that one of the most astonishing and sad shortcomings of our social movements is our insularity. We don't know what the others are doing. And I think that that's a very important step that we need to take, which is to connect work that is being done in different parts of the country so that we get to learn from each other, we get to talk to each other, and we get to engage with each other. I mean, as a political scientist, for me, this seems to be the way forward. There's so much work happening on the ground, of which so many others do not know. Those of us who travel know, well, it's our business to connect. And I think that that connect would be a very powerful connect, which will, I think, Rituti, then have reverberations and have an impact on the kind of bottoms-up approach that you aspire to and which I completely, would go along with. I think that that's really important. Together with that, so I'm not talking only about community health groups working with local health traditions, connecting with each other and connecting with other groups that are not using them. But I'm also talking about, we're talking about an ecological democracy. It's a very, very, very important aspiration. We are talking about a democracy that is rooted in a certain context, but is not parochial. So we are talking about a democracy which enables exchange of ideas between different kinds of social movements. So we're not only talking about community health groups. We are talking about groups that Vijay himself referred to, knowledge systems about water. There are knowledge systems like medical knowledge systems that have value but have decreased in importance and have become marginalized over the last 150 years or so. We have so many knowledge systems that people have which need to be foregrounded, which need to be brought back to usage and to be made contemporaneous, which is what a large number of groups are doing. But then again, there's that amazing insularity, that there are groups that work with water, that work with agriculture, those that work with medicinal plants. They need to connect. And we need to learn from each other and borrow from each other. And after all, the people we are dealing with are the same. The communities that we are dealing with are the same. And yet, we don't see this as a political project. That we need to communicate across different kinds of engagements of social movements, which can then bring some kind of a comprehensive picture. So I'm talking about a much greater communication, a more self-consciously political communication about these issues, which I think can give us a different way of thinking about these things. And I know, I mean, I should stop being a political scientist if I don't believe in the power of democracy from below. I do believe that this kind of a democratic impulse and this kind of an impulse of exchange and learning at the ground level can have very powerful impact on structures on which, structures above it. And I think that once we begin to take this business seriously of communication and learning from each other, we are bound to be able to influence better institutional structures that are responsible for making policies for people on the ground. Let's see if we can make this a kind of political agenda. Times are changing very fast, lots of things are changing currently, and I think we need to link these kinds of issues, which seem sort of marginal and remote, from the larger kinds of political changes that are taking place. I think we need to link them and to see how they can work for each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhulika. I want to try